Hello, my name is Brian Balke of Hypnosis Rising. I'm a certified hypnotherapist practicing in Southern California and around the world via Zoom. Welcome to our presentation on relationships and a look at the age-old question as to why our relationships start so well with such high hopes, and that those relationships that when they fall apart really are very painful to us. The hypnotherapists have a certain special perspective on this problem, because most of the way that we learn to relate to other people happens when we're very, very small, before we really know why we're doing what we're doing or can articulate why we're doing what we're doing. We've got our parents are our gods. We just have to figure out how to work with them. And so we do that unconsciously, without a critical reflection. And then when we go off to school, all of those conventions and practices are placed at question because we come into contact with a lot more adults. And so in order to manage that problem of, preserving our relationship with our gods, our parents, while meeting the expectations of other adults, the mind breaks into two parts, the conscious and subconscious mind. And what that means, though, is that those subconscious behaviors, those conditionings that we had from our parents are still operating beyond or beneath the level of conscious awareness and are not really susceptible to reason. And this is why we fall in love with or join partnerships with people that are for reasons that we don't really understand. And what we're going to look at today is how that actually progresses to the point where that complementarity or that synergy that brought us together eventually can quite often end up driving us crazy and taking the relationship apart. So that's the subject for today's discussion. So the fundamental question is, can't we all just get along? And this is a universal human question that affects all of our relationships, whether it's friendships that get torn apart by jealousy and gossip, whether it's a business employment situation that we have to leave because our boss doesn't protect us from the pressures that he's under, it becomes abusive. It can also manifest in social settings, for example, with children whose parents are involved in very sophisticated financial and political competitions. And without the tools to really understand what's going on, they can often just go around being rude and maybe even violent towards one another. But we should also recognize that there are situations in which people with very high expectations for conduct and social or living conditions can become so remote and unattainable that nobody can get close to them. Now, this is not a new question, obviously. People have been worried about how to make functioning communities and societies for a long time. The Greeks studied this in particular as they formed their city-states, going from tribal communities to much larger governments with a lot more formal structure to them. And so, in the ancient world, the belief was that there were only four elements: water, fire, air, and earth. And the thought was that depending upon which of these elements was dominant in the personality, people would exhibit certain traits. They would even look certain ways. And so what happened was that if you were trying to organize people to get something done based upon how they looked or what you believed to be their dominant characteristics, you would know how to slot them into your community or into your team in order to be able to get done what needed to get done. A slightly more sophisticated view of personality and its origins is the Zodiac. This in astrology seems to be a little bit woo-woo, but fundamentally there's some reason to believe that there might actually be some validity to this, because based upon when a child is conceived, the mother is going to be in a completely different environment, and particularly in the seasonal climes. That the kind of food that's available, the amount of sunlight, the temperature, what kinds of activities she's doing, all of these are going to change the environment in which the fetus develops. And so quite naturally, you would think that this would lead to their behavior being different based upon when they were conceived. Now, this gets to be a lot more sophisticated in astrology, kind of picked up and carried along with this, with the idea that based upon when you were born and where the planets were, meets the stars and everything like that, that you could predict almost everything that's important about your life. And this may be less respectable in this modern era, but it's based upon this, I think, what may be a fundamental truth, which is that when basically when you're conceived, that's going to affect the chemistry in which you developed. Now, a much more rigorous approach came out of psychology, and there's various different systems of this. Myers-Briggs personality profile is a popular one, but it's basically looking at how we think and interact with the world around us. And there are 4 trait pairs, and we all live in a spectrum between one end of the continuum, from one end of the pairing to the other end. There are people who are not fully extroverted or introverted, but somewhere in between. But nonetheless, you take a test with answering a bunch of questions. You determine kind of which end of the pairing you are typically operate in. And so based upon the 4 traits, there's 16 different personality types. And that means that there's 256 different possible relationships when people just kind of randomly mix together. And what's supposed to happen with Myers-Briggs, this is a corporate, this is done a lot in corporations, which is that based upon your personality type, when you meet another person, you kind of declare, I'm this personality type, to tell you what personality type they are. And you kind of have a sense as to how you should go about working together. This is really complicated. It gets to be even more complicated in more recent psychological profiles. There are 5 traits with 6 facets each, which means that there's 900 different personalities. And so obviously you need to have an app to prompt you when you go out and meet a random person to tell you how you're supposed to act. So if there's no kind of universal way of thinking about behavior that's practical and that guides us into satisfying relationships, then what we're really left with is to write a story about our lives and to understand where we came from and where we're going, and to try to surround ourselves with people that help us to feel more fulfilled. And so let's talk about how we got to be who we are and why we do the things that we do. From a physical perspective, it's the fundamental issue is that we need energy to survive and to accomplish the things that kind of make us feel fulfilled. And those are really 2 different things. The first part, how I get energy, is who I am. And the reason that that's put that way is because we're social creatures and we get our energy from other people quite often. Even those that produce it from the ground have to buy inputs and get inputs from other people these days. There are very few people who are fully independent. And in some sense, unless you have a relationship with somebody, how do you know that you even exist? So this who I am, or how I get energy, has got aspects of our talents and culture and the society that we live in and the roles we fulfill as fathers and daughters and employers and things like that. And this context that we live in tends to be kind of long-term and durable. It is also, however, negotiable. When we say that Einstein was a German Jewish genius, well, eventually he left Germany, and you can even change your religion if you want to. But then there's how I am, and this determines where we apply energy. What do we do with the energy that we're given? And a lot of this is really subjective experience, our mental, physical, emotional, and kind of sensory state. And this changes an awful lot. And so what happens from hour to hour throughout the day is, if we're told that we have an opportunity to have what we want, we'll ask for different things. But these are not negotiable. When you're hungry, you're hungry. When you're sad, you're sad. And part of what we need to do in order to manage a relationship is to be able to describe ourselves and explain ourselves. Describe our state to ourselves, so that we can separate out those temporary conditions from the long-term situation that we're in. So just as an illustration of how I am is expressed as who I am, well, the how I am question of these two men, Beethoven and Prince, was kind of what is love really? And Beethoven, in the era in which he was born, ended up writing music for very large collections of people under the patronage of the very wealthy. And he had to understand all of these different kinds of instruments and voices and how to blend them together in order to make something really spectacular, really moving piece of music, such as Beethoven's Ninth Symphony. Prince, on the other hand, had a much smaller band of people that he would go out and create experiences that were very exciting and uplifting for his fans, using amplifiers and things like that. And so two very, very different experiences of who they were, given the social and the cultural context in which, and their race and everything like that, in which they did the work that they did. But they were both really concerned, when you look at them and study their personality, with the fundamental question of what is love. Now, we need to be careful, because when we get into an analysis and trying to understand, we can slip into this viewpoint of Rene Descartes, which is I think, therefore I am. It is that we know that we exist because of the fact that we think. This is one way of looking at the whole challenge of psychotherapy, which is that it was created by very sophisticated people who did a lot of thinking. But in point of fact, a lot of how I am occurs before we can think. We know how I am long before we know who I am. And it turns out that the how I am drives our relationships. So let's look at that. How does that evolve? How does that how I am manifest in our minds from the time that we're small children? And so think of this circle as a mind, and you're looking at the person's face, and they're sitting in front of you. So the euphoria, the green area, is on the right side of the brain, and the red is on the left side of the brain. And once we get to an age where we can kind of control our movement and wander around and choose our experiences, we have basically two emotions, euphoria and fear, that help us to sort out what we like and what we don't like. And the fact of the matter is that you can't be euphoric all the time. You can't be afraid all the time. You can't be the child that goes and tastes the frosting and all the cupcakes at the party looking for the perfect one. Nor can you be the child that goes and hides under the bed when the guests arrive. You need balance between these two things. And that balance is our ability to maintain and sustain that balance is given to us by our parents, who explain to us what's going on and help to prepare us for the experiences that we're going to have by talking to us. And that occurs up in the thinking part of the mind. And so this is the part of the mind which is supposed to maintain balance between euphoria and fear in our lives. And when that happens, that's actually the wonderful state of play. Now, based upon the circumstances under which we're born, we're going to have probably, some difference in the level of euphoria and fear in our lives. And those that have a little bit more euphoria tend to believe that the world is a safe place, and they tend to be a little bit more adventurous in the way that they approach the world. Those that have a little bit of fear tend to be a little bit more of a protector. Now, the right side of the brain is, the adventurers tend to be more active in the right side of the brain, because the right side of the brain just knows what's out there in the world. It's something that goes out and finds and recognizes things. The protective personalities tend to live a little bit more on the left side of the brain. That left side of the brain understands sequences and processes and can plan out and anticipate and things like that. And so what happens is that that protective personality tends to live a little bit more on the left side. Now, if we need balance, what this means is that adventurers and protectors are going to seek each other out in our relationships. Now, this is just, again, to reiterate what happens when we go off to school. Now we have a much more complex social situation with competing requirements amongst our various different teachers, and also competition between us and our friends. And so what ends up happening is that there's part of the mind called the conscious mind, which is split off and sent out into the world to try to understand the social, the opportunities in the social realm, to figure out what our identity is and how we can have influence over other people, basically. And there's a barrier put in between that part of the mind and the rest of the mind, which blocks us from responding immediately to the events that happen in the daily world, no matter how threatening they may sound. So what ends up happening is that this is intended to protect our fundamental behaviors, our family behaviors, our behaviors in the family setting, which are so essential to our survival. But this persists all through adulthood, which is that you have this social mind, which is trying to figure out what the rules are for success in the world, for finding fulfillment. And it has experiences during the day, but the behaviors, the way that we kind of allocate energy, how much we sleep, when we sleep, and all those kinds of things like that, they shouldn't change really fast. That's bad for our bodies and our physiology. And so it's only when we go to sleep at night that actually the subconscious looks at the experiences that the conscious mind had during the day, sorts them out by emotional relevance or emotional priority or intensity, and figures out whether or not actually what's the best way to adapt to the challenges and opportunities which seem to be arising in the waking world. Now, what's important to understand is that based upon the personality type of our primary caretaker when we're children, whether it's mother or father, okay, or grandmother or grandfather, okay, is that we tend to be complementary even in that relationship. A protective caretaker who plans everything out with the left brain, makes sure that the sandwiches are there and the sweaters and the EpiPen and the Band-Aids and everything like that. Create conditions under which their children can just go out and explore. And they may get owies, but they'll get better. They'll be taken care of and get better. So they create little adventurers who believe that the world is basically a safe place, and their attitude is, I can do it myself. One of the challenges for an adventurer with a protective caretaker is that they often feel like they're being prevented from doing things that they want to be able to do. Now, on the other hand, an adventurous caretaker takes their children out onto the roller coaster. They take them whitewater rafting. They tend to dress provocatively and draw attention from strangers, that appears to be a threat to the family unit. And so these adventurous caretakers create little protectors for children. The world is a little bit of an unsettled place, and a typical comment, or a kind of symptomatic comment for a little protective child, is to say, I'm bored. And when they're taken off on an adventure, what they say is, not again. So what happens is that we enter into relationships with this left or right brain propensity, adventurous or protective propensities. And what it turns out is that two adventurers in a relationship can have a lot of fun in the beginning, but they compete with each other for social attention. And so eventually one of them is going to be driven to be a protector by the other one, becoming more and more aggressive in the way that they seek attention from other people. Two protectors are just going to sit on the couch and nothing is, arguing or trying to figure out who's going to decide where they're going to go for dinner, and nothing ever really happens. So what it turns out is that the most stable relationship pairings are between a protector and an adventurer. So let's look at that in a little bit more detail as to how that works. So on the two columns here, we have the kind of the characteristic behaviors of adventurers, and on the other side, the characteristic behavior of protectors. And we've already talked about how adventurers act and protectors plan, and how beneficial that is in terms of surviving or being successful in the parent-child relationship. And that children adapt to the style of their parent. But this also extends to the way that we communicate and the characteristics, the way that adventurers and protectors communicate tends to be very, very positively complementary. So adventurers love to talk about their adventures. They love to relive that experience. They're very deeply immersed in the positive sensations or the negative sensations. And so they can speak at great length, and they're encouraged to speak at great length so that mom or daddy knows exactly everything that's going on and can protect them. Protectors learn by inference. So while the adventurer is rattling on about, the vacation they went on, the protector is learning a lot of things about the kinds of places they like to go, and using that to be able to develop better plans for their partner. The protectors, on the other hand, tend to speak directly. They say one thing, they determine this is the plan, this is where we need to go, and they just simply say what needs to happen. You ask a protector, how their vacation was, and they'll say, fine, that's in the past, let's move forward. Okay, well, what's good about this in speaking directly is that adventurers learn literally. They believe if they're told and they know what to do, they can do it. This is what happened all throughout their childhoods. And so what this means is that protectors empower adventurers to be creative and productive people. At the same time the adventurer is doing that, they have all these sensations that they can then share and bring back to their protector, which gives the protector more information about the world, so that they can develop better plans. So this partnership is really, you can see the two pieces work together very, very well. And this is why we choose the people that we do in our professional and personal relationships, to have this complementarity. Along with this, adventurers tend to be outgoing, while protectors tend to be reserved. And this is where the problem begins, which is that adventurers love to talk to other people. So you get into a relationship, one of them, and they're going to continue to want to talk to other people. Well, now that's a threat to the protector. Okay. Who likes to sit back and just talk to one or more, one or a couple of people, usually about intellectual topics. And unfortunately, this is really terribly boring to the adventurer. The adventurer wants things that are new. It wants to have they want to have new experiences and sensations. As well, another area of tension, or what can be a partnership, but also a tension. Now, this can be beneficial. The adventurer, by going out and meeting other people, learns lots of stuff to bring back to their protector. The protector, by being reserved, can watch their adventurer go out in the social setting and just learn a lot and watching them about the people that they're interacting with. And so this can be beneficial, but it's also got, if there's any insecurity in the relationship, it begins to work against the relationship. Adventurers love family, or tend to prioritize family, because family was always a very pleasant experience for them. Protectors are far more concerned about creating wealth and accumulating value, creating value and accumulating wealth. They need choices, okay, because they were always trying to figure out how to escape the crisis that their adventurous parent was creating for them. So what ends up happening is the protectors conserve their options. What you'll find is that betrayal in relationships, serious betrayal in relationships, quite often it's the protector that initiates that, because they're never certain whether anything's going to work out for them and when they're going to have to escape and find a different situation. Conversely, adventurers crave attention. They don't like being alone, and they will chase after their protector. If they don't get the attention that they want, they create a crisis. They'll walk off the end of the pier. Conversely, protectors always look twice before crossing. And so this can make it very, very difficult now for an adventurer to actually have a sensational experience. They want to bring their protector along. They want them to pay attention to them and participate. And the protector is always saying, well, I don't know if we should really do this. So there's a frustration that builds up in the adventurer. So these four middle things between the way that it's socialized, the priorities, the decision making, and the way that they deal with frustration, okay, really begins to go bad in these last four stages. The relationship becomes actively antagonistic. Adventurers tend to gunny sack. Whenever they have an emotion, they associate that emotion very, very powerfully with all the experiences that have raised that emotion in the past at that level of intensity. And so they tend to just go on and on about all the bad experiences they've had in the relationship. In the meantime, the protector doesn't want to get into, doesn't want to pick at the wound. So they clam up and they won't talk. For this reason, the adventurers become really insecure and emotionally brittle. The protector becomes physically reticent. They don't want to be near the person that they're in a relationship with, much less be touched by them. The adventurer then becomes crushed by rejection, and the protector is haunted by guilt that they're failing to protect the one that they are responsible for. And when the relationship eventually begins to fall apart, the adventurer tends to say, hey, you know, if I can't have it, nobody can. And the protector says, well, you know, this person is just going to blow everything up. I should try to get as much as I can when I'm giving away. So they become really, really horrible to each other. Starting off from that place where in the beginning, they were really good for each other. And this all happens simply because of the inability to understand and manage the sources of frustration that exist in that relationship, which are natural. So one of the things that we have to do is understand who it is that we're communicating with in a relationship. We need to express ourselves in a way that can be heard and appreciated by the person that we're talking to. And this means not talking in a way that's appropriate for us. So, with an adventurer, you know, just be straight, flat out. You look gorgeous, you know, and eat your heart out, Miss Protector. That's what they want to hear. They want to know that they are worthy of attention. Now, the protector, you don't want to say that she looks gorgeous, because what she's going to think is, oh, well, wasn't I gorgeous yesterday? It's always inference going on. And so what you do is you indirectly compliment them. Oh, where did you get that? Okay. Well, why are they interested in that? Do you mind if I tell Miss A? Oh, wow, okay, this adventurous lady, she's known to be a flashy dresser, so I must look really nice. So again, being very indirect and allowing the protector to infer what it is that you're getting at, inviting them into the dialogue with you and giving them space for doing that, giving them options. They don't have to answer a question if they don't want to. Okay, these are all things that you do for a protector. Also, in terms of the way that we direct attention towards an adventurer, you know, you push the adventurer out, you make them the center of attention. And this can be a tricky thing in a group of adventurers, which is you've got to make sure that the attention gets passed around and shared. But everybody gets their moment in the sun. While with when you're in a relationship of authority with a protector, you know, you basically ask them to reveal themselves. You invite them into a process with you in a way where it's something that they can choose to engage or not. So now, you know, we've got these fundamental insecurities in that, you know, in the middle stages of that progression from complementarity to antagonism. And in managing those frustrations in the middle, there's just some basic advice. For the protector, let's start with the protector. And the fact of the matter is that yes, your adventurer loves attention, but they are far more committed to the relationship than you are. Adventurers give their hearts. Protectors give their minds. And once you've given your heart to somebody, it's really, really hard to walk away from them. That's why they get so desperate when the relationship is falling apart. You know them better than they know themselves, because you bring your mind to the situation. You sit back and you observe them, and you can really hurt them if you don't use that knowledge to their benefit. Okay, so be gentle with them. Come forward every now and then. Try to take some time. You know, you got all this understanding about them and knowledge of how they behave. Try to give them an adventure right every now and then. Just surprise them with something. Take them off to a place that they haven't been before that you think that they would enjoy. And if you have to leave, don't beat them down. You know, give them time to find somebody else and be conscious of the fact that if you keep on walking away from relationships, the conclusion that you will be inexorably drawn towards is it is better just to be alone. So what that means is that if you enjoy being in a relationship, and at least for the companionship and the occasional adventure, then it's worth investing. Now, for the adventure, understand that even though they stand apart and kind of are wishy-washy and don't want to engage as much as you would like them to, your protector loves you more than you love them. The adventure is really into the sensation of the experience. Your protector is going to study you and understand you. Now, that doesn't mean that the sensational experience isn't valuable. The protector needs to feel something. That's why they chose you, is because you create feelings in them. It's very hard for them to access because when you're in fear, you don't really pay attention as much to what's going on inside of yourself as a child. And so you're just not as sensitive. You need somebody to show you how to do that. And that's why your protector chose you. And a protector can also commit their loyalties to more than one cause. Just because they're at work, working hard on a project, doesn't mean that they're not thinking about you. Okay, if encouraged to, they'll try to integrate everything all into one process. It's just giving them a reason and encouragement to do that. Give them some space, and it's important to do this in a way that also gives you the opportunity to demonstrate that others appreciate you. Okay, if they don't want to go out, dress up and go out with your friends. Okay, they're going to be at home thinking about, what are they doing now that they're out dressed up with their friends. Okay, and that's going to create that anxiety that they had at the beginning of the relationship, that anxiety which pulls them out. I just hate to say, you just need to understand their protective mindset. There is some manipulation involved here, which is creating anxiety for them, because then they have the challenge and the opportunity to prove that they bring value again. And then, ask your protector what it is that they think you should do. They'll give you some really good advice. They really do study you. If you do have to leave, if the relationship is just broken, the hardest thing for the adventurer to do is to get their heart back. And it's just being really conscious of that process. You need to give them some options. Okay, don't just walk up and say, this is it, I'm gone, and leave. Okay, it's giving them some time to invest their energy in new areas and new things, and giving them the opportunity to really create success for themselves in some other part of their life, so that they have that as a buffer when the relationship actually falls apart. And get help with moving on. Okay, the adventurer feels a lot more deeply, and there's just very powerful associations physiologically with the person that you're leaving. And if you don't actually take some time and invest some energy and actually softening those associations and processing the experience of the relationship, it can be really, really hard for you to actually advance, to enter into another relationship that's satisfying to you. So the whole point of this, then, deep dive into relationships is that what's important is to make the best of this complementarity. We see this in this third stage in this path towards maturity in relationships, which starts as small children with survival and just learning how to get along with our parents, that moves through this stage of sexual adolescence, which is the primary driver for leaving that parental relationship, but also puts us in a situation where we've got kind of real stress in trying to figure out how to manage our behaviors. And this is part of what makes the divide between the conscious and subconscious so deep. It's the trouble that we get into, is we're trying to figure out how to manage that transition. But even so, we tend to pair up as adventurers and protectors, and that's a complementary relationship. So it's a complementary strategy, as shown by those green arrows. And where we get into trouble is when we insist that we are normative. that, you know, when things start going wrong in the relationship, I've made it this far doing the things that I do. I'm successful. I was successful without you, and we should just be more and do more like the way that I do things. And what's shown in that descent towards antagonism is that it's exactly the tendency to do that that causes relationships to really break down in very, very painful ways. So the goal is to manage the frustrations, to work to the middle, and declare and manage the terms. Okay, what do you need as an adventurer? You know, what do you need as a protector? Talk about that. Okay, internalize it, and as I said, work to the middle. Recognize that a little stress never killed anybody. You can't be in euphoria all the time. And a matter of fact, the best state in which the mind is most active is that state of play, where there's a little bit of risk and a lot of reassurance, and you feel like you can explore and have new possibilities unfold before you. That's always a little bit of a scary thing for the subconscious, to have change. But that variety is the spice of life. The reason that we choose the people that we do in our professional and personal relationships is because they're not us. And that is where happily ever after starts. Thanks for listening. Hope to see you soon.